Hey everyone, today we're gonna talk about something a little bit different. I'm not gonna do a specific maker, I'm gonna talk about Valentine's Day and chocolate because we're coming up on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and I want to talk about how they came together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Valentine's Day and how it came, and chocolate and how it came, and then how eventually hundreds of years later they came together. So what I'll do is I'll talk about where Valentine's Day came from and the history of that. And then I'll talk a little bit about the history of chocolate and how it was related to Valentine's Day. And this might turn out to be a two-part video because then I also want to talk about the history of Valentine's being an aphrodisiac and some of the chemicals that have been involved or implicated in chocolate and how they may or may not have aphrodisiac properties. So let's start with Valentine's Day. And I'm going to be looking down at my notes a lot because I want to make sure that I get things correct and that I'm not telling you guys lies. And I've got some quotes for you. So Valentine's Day history is kind of one of those things where it's gotten into the lore and it's not exactly correct. So there's usually three parts to Valentine's Day and where it came from. So the first part is it came from a Roman festival called Lupercalia. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it or not. You know me in pronunciation. Who knows? So Lupercalia was an annual mid-February Roman festival. It was a fertility rite. It involved purification. And the regular history that's given is that men drew names of women out of a box that would then be their consort for the year. And then they also involved naked people running through streets and slapping each other with red things. Just that's the lore. So then the second part comes in the early 200s. So you have as usual with most holidays, you have the Roman pagan festival being converted into a Christian and then being commercialized. So that was the Roman pagan festival. Then we have in the 200s when the Romans started persecuting Christians, and there came a priest named Valentine, possibly a bishop, possibly two people, possibly more people. And basically, Valentine was beheaded for his refusal to deny his faith. One legend has that Valentine performed underground weddings for romantic couples whose weddings were not legal by the Roman emperor. Another had Valentine healing his jailer's daughter. Another had Valentine healing his jailer's daughter and then falling in love with her. And as he's going to be executed, writing her a note that says, it expresses his love and says, "From your Valentine." And then you have in the third part of that kind of thing is you have in 1495 when Christianity became the major religion of the empire. So Roman deity was no longer the major thing. The lore is that Pope Gelasius I banned the Roman festival Lupercalia because of its licentiousness and replaced it with the commemoration of St. Valentine's on February 14th, encouraging Christian romantic relationships. So that's the normal lore. Like if you Google right now word of Valentine's Day, that's the kind of stuff that will come up for you. The problem is with that, if this happened in 495, then there's no evidence of any kind of romantic Valentine's Day commemoration for 800 or 900 years. So if that was when it began, there's no evidence of it beginning. So it was something, if it's when it began, we'd expect to see something happening somewhere. So here's the parts that are true. So true is that Lupercalia was a Roman fertility festival. And we know this because we have letters from Plutarch and it describing the activity. And I want to read here what he describes. So this is what he said. The priests slaughter goats, and then after 2 youths of noble birth have been brought to them, some of them touch their foreheads with a bloody knife, and others wipe the stain off at once with a wool dipped in milk. The youths must laugh after their foreheads are wiped. After this, they cut the goat skins into strips and run about with nothing but a girdle, striking all who meet them with the thongs, and young married women do not try to avoid their blows, fancying that they promote conception and easy childbirth. A peculiarity of the festival is that the Luperci, the priests, sacrifice a dog also. So that's the way Plutarch described it. So it happened. There's lots of evidence of it happening, but there's no evidence of, it was a fertility rite, but there's no evidence of romantic pairing or men pairing with women or any kind of romantic coupling in that way. So the second part, there's some truth. There obviously was Christian persecution in the early 200s, 300s, but it varied by rulers. Some rulers were like tolerant and others were not. Some rulers blamed Christians for undermining faith in Roman gods with their faith, and obviously the penalty was death, and then they would become martyrs in the Christian religion. So there arose this cult of martyrdom, where people would develop, after they were martyred, people would develop these elaborate narratives, not as a way to be untruthful, but as a way to venerate these people who had died for their religion. So the martyrs also then became part of the Roman Catholic religious calendar. So Valentine was a martyr. There may have been more than one Valentine who was a martyr. Valentine was a very popular Roman name. There were popes named Valentine. There were emperors named Valentine. There were lots of just regular people named Valentine. The Latin root of Valentine is valio, which means to be strong. So there were lots of those things are true about it. But so here's what we know about the possibilities of who Saint Valentine could actually be. So there's 2 possibilities that come to our attention. Both of them were supposedly beheaded on February 14th, and it could have been in the year 269, could have been in the year 270, or it could have been in the year 273. Hard to say. So the first one was a priest. It was Priest Valentine, and he was in Rome. And he was arrested by the Emperor Claudius, and he defended his faith, and he was basically put on house arrest in the household of a nobleman, Asterius. So it wasn't really like a jail, it was more like house arrest. Valentine healed the daughter, and it was his adopted daughter. He healed Asterius's adopted daughter, and they were all so impressed by this that she was blind. That was her malady. They were also impressed that the whole household converted to Christianity, and when the emperor found out, Claudius found out, he had them arrested and beheaded. So that's one possible Valentine. The second possible Valentine is a Bishop Valentine of Terni. And he encountered a scholar named Crato who asked him to heal his son who, quote, was crippled since the age of 3. So Valentine attempted to convert Crato. He said, I can heal your son, but you have to have faith as a father to heal your son. So you have to convert to Christianity and have faith first. And Crato said, no, I'm not doing that. And so Valentine said, okay, I will heal your son based on my faith. And he healed his son. And this led to the conversion of the household. And since Crato was a scholar, it led to the conversion of many other scholars. And this really ticked off the Roman senators. And so the Roman senators beheaded Valentine, and they arrested and beheaded Crato and many of his household as well. So there's some debate about whether they're actually two different people. They sound pretty similar. The stories, the reason why they're not considered reliable is because the stories were written down hundreds of years after it happened. So these stories were not written down until many, many, many years after this happened, possibly in real life. And again, the narratives tend to get embellished as you go along. So there's also problems with this. So you have problems with historical problems where you have Claudius I didn't really prosecute Christians all that much. So maybe they got Claudius I and Claudius II mixed up, and Claudius II really didn't do it that much either. He spent a lot of time out of Italy on military campaigns, so he wasn't really around. The other problem historically with this is the earliest list of martyrs that we have in 354 does not list Valentine as a martyr. But there is some evidence of local traditional remembrance of Valentine, where you find some in the 300s, where you have some churches named after St. Valentine, and you have some relics being attributed to St. Valentine. When you get to the 700s, you have an English monk that records both of their histories, so the two stories of the Valentine. So then let's jump way ahead to 1969. We come to 1969, and the Roman Catholic Council Vatican II is having a meeting, and they decide to revise the calendar of the saints. And they remove, among other saints, they remove Valentine from the calendar, and they also remove St. Nicholas, actually, coincidentally. It's not that their days were eliminated. They were no longer, they were still to be honored, but it was optional. So the reason that they were removed is that there was no historical evidence to back up the stories that could be verified by the Vatican. So you have these guys that don't match up exactly with history. You have, there's no romance in any of these stories. Both of the stories that I told you about Valentine, there's no couples falling in love, there's no couples getting married, there's no romance involved in these stories. That's something that comes about in the narratives later on. And then you come to the one about Lupercalia. So Gelasius I, who was a pope who served long after Roman Christian persecution was pretty much done. And he wrote a famous letter to the Roman Senate, and this is actually how we know most of the rituals of Lupercalia, because he detailed them in this letter. So he said that, yes, this is a bad thing. No baptized Christians should be participating in this festival, but he did not replace it or suggest that it would be replaced by a celebration of Valentine on the same day. So you have Valentine's being beheaded on the 14th, you have Lupercalia happening on the 15th. It's just kind of coincidence that they happen at the same time. So if those are not the start of Valentine's, then where did Valentine's start? Where does the romantic connection start? So during the Middle Ages, it probably started with a circle of friends and poetry. So it's usually attributed to the poetry of Chaucer. Yes, that Chaucer that you know from the Canterbury Tales. It involves, so courtly love had been a thing that had been around for years. Basically, marriage didn't really involve love at the time. Marriage was arranged, it was political, it was financial, it didn't really involve love. So there sprung up this idea of courtly love, and this has been around before Chaucer, but Chaucer wrote poems about it, and Chaucer is actually considered one of the first English romantic poets. So I'm going to read this so I make sure I get this right. So in the 1370s, possibly 1380s, Chaucer wrote a poem called The Parliament of Fowls. And the narrator in this poem he's telling of a dream where he goes to this beautiful garden, beautiful sunlit garden, and he sees a queen, and the queen is nature. And one of the lines, line 309 and 310, it says, and I'm going to read this in modern English because Middle English is whack. And I had enough of that in college. So this is the 2 lines that mentions Valentine's Day. So for this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every bird comes there to choose his mate. So this, he goes on later in the poem to mention Valentine's Day 3 more times, and both emphasizing that it's an annual occurrence, and each time it's linking it to a mating ritual or spring or something like that. And so scholars have argued that Chaucer is the originator of romantic Valentine's Day, or the link of love and Valentine's Day. So he would have been familiar with this date, and he may have just picked it as something around that time that people would know. So I don't know that he picked it because there was a romantic tradition, just that it was something that happened around early spring. And so from there we have evidence in the 1400s. People were writing notes to each other and using Valentine's in much the way that we use it today. That how we use Valentine's Day, like, you're my Valentine, I'm going to give you a Valentine, not just referring to the day. Okay, so you have these traditions that develop around Chaucer's idea of Valentine's Day, and it starts in England, mostly with the aristocracy. Then it spreads to Europe, then it spreads to America, then it spreads to other classes. And so these traditions develop where you have gift giving, you have elaborate banquets and parties being thrown, you have folk games of matchmaking, you have the flower petal, loves me not, he loves me not. And the most popular one is a written expression of affection that gets exchanged with people that you love. So it's not really until the early 1800s where Valentine's Day really becomes commercialized. So that's the history of Valentine's Day. Let's give you a quick summary of how chocolate is related to love, romance, and sexual desire. So ancient Aztec and Mayan rituals, marriage rituals, often had cacao playing a role. And this is where some of it may have come from. So you have let me see if I can find the quote here. So you have Bernal Diaz Castillo, who was the chronicler for Hernan Cortes, who conquered Mexico. He wrote about Emperor Montezuma, and he said that from time to time they brought him some cups of fine gold with a certain drink made of cacao, which they said was for success with women. Sometimes 50 great jars of prepared cacao and foam. Okay, I don't know about you, but if I were to drink 50 cups of cacao, desire is not the feeling I would be feeling. Extremely full, bloated, yes, maybe. But anyway, this is part of the mythology of Montezuma, that this was gave him stamina and made him desirable and have success with women. So that was where one of the places where it started. Then there was a Mayan ritual where the father of the girl would bring the son into his home, and it would be kind of like an interview where he would talk to the son about the marriage, and they would do this over a drink of cacao. And the word for this was, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, takha. Takha. Tachaa. I don't know the proper pronunciation of that. There's other accounts where the Mayan king would have vessels of beaten chocolate brought to him in order to help him decide for a wife. There are accounts of wedding day. The bride and groom would exchange 5 grains of cacao each with each other while the other guests would drink chocolate. So it's very, very, very much mixed in with marriage and wedding rituals. What else? So for the Aztecs, cacao was legal currency. It could have been involved in dowries, to pay dowries. I'm trying to think. Oh, there's many scenes, petroglyphs of cacao being involved in marriage rituals. So there's this link between cacao beans and marriage and sexual desire that ends up carrying over to Europe when the cacao beans come to Europe. So when the cacao beans get to Europe, they come first to the Spanish court, but a lot of the records we have come from the French court and French aristocracy, and some English as well. So you have, let's see, the first one I think is in the 1600s. I can't find it. Okay, so you have, here's some fun quotes. So in 1624, Francis Rausch, a German theologian, claimed that drinking chocolate was provoking a blaze of passion and scandals in monasteries. Monks were often the ones to prepare the cacao. You have an English doctor, a British physician in the 17th century, Henry Stube. He wrote The Natural History of Chocolate in 1662. He said, quote, "A great use of chocolate in venery," which means sexual indulgence, "and for supplying the testicles with balsam or sap." And he also prepared a chocolate for King Charles II, who had a particular reputation, and he paid a lot of money for chocolate every year, as much as he did to maintain his mistress, if not a little bit more. Let's see, who else do I have here quoted? We have, and you can see this in paintings from the era, how chocolate pots are depicted in certain scenes and with certain kinds of people. There's this air of sexual desire and romantic attachment to it. You have Madame de Pompadour, who drank chocolate with amber in order to warm her senses and appear less frigid. You had Casanova, who called it the elixir of love. You have the Marquis de Sade, who was rumored to drink large quantities of chocolate. You have a French doctor, Guillaume René I can't say this last name, Lefebvre. He was in the late 1700s, claimed to have developed a form of drinking chocolate that was as useful as it is pleasant, not just an aphrodisiac, but also a cure for venereal disease. So yeah, that's not true. So it partly developed that air about it because it was exotic, and exotic sometimes has exotic equals erotic sort of thing going on for it. So a lot of the aphrodisiac reputation flourished in the French royal court and just amongst aristocracy in Europe at the time. When chocolate became more readily available to the masses, when you started seeing chocolate houses appear, and you started seeing it become less of a delicacy and more of an everyday thing, you start to see that it becomes less exotic and more commonplace. In the 18th century, you have the development of the first solid or eating chocolate, the first bar by Fry's out of England, and that replaces drinking chocolate, and that kind of changes it up a lot. And the first time we see chocolate really aimed towards Valentine's Day is with Cadbury. So Cadbury in 1868 introduces a heart-shaped box of chocolates, and I have such a hard time making a heart with my hands. He introduces a heart-shaped box of chocolates and marketed it specifically for Valentine's Day, and specifically not just for the chocolate. So you would buy this chocolate and then it came in this pretty box, and you could keep romantic mementos in there, letters from your Valentine or hair clippings, things that you would want to keep as keepsakes, you would keep in this box as well. So that's where really the connection between Valentine's Day and chocolate started, with Cadbury's out of England. And if you think about chocolate now, let me just think if I want to tell you anything else about that. Okay. So I think I'm going to stop there for today, and we'll finish up next week. We'll talk about how, why it was perceived as an aphrodisiac, why even today some people think there are chemicals in it that act as an aphrodisiac, and what those chemicals are next week, because it's kind of interesting. So yeah, we have Cadbury's, and then wham, commercialization of chocolate takes off with Valentine's Day. Commercialization of Valentine's Day just in general takes off from like the mid 1800s. It just shoots up crazy. There's cards. That's when Hallmark starts to come around. Hallmark appears in the United States. You have Hershey's Kisses in 1907. Hershey's Kisses, they're called Kisses because the chocolate depositing machine made like this smooching noise, so they called it Kisses, but it obviously comes with a different connotation. And then you have, in the 1930s, you have movies like Jean Harlow and Dinner at 8, where it's a non-speaking movie, but she's on this bed with silk sheets and a heart pillow behind her, and she's luxuriously, sensuously eating chocolate bonbons on this bed. So you get this association of romantic love with chocolate carrying on from the 1800s when Cadbury started into the early 20th century, and it really hasn't stopped. Russell Stover in 1923 was the first in America to create a heart-shaped chocolate box, and they are still one of the biggest sellers of the grab-and-go Valentines to this day. So there you have it. You have chocolate coming up with their slight reputation, and you have Valentine's developing a reputation for romantic love, and they collide in the mid-1800s, and the commercialization and the association has just been linked ever since with chocolate and Valentine's. Okay, for reals, I'm going to stop now. Okay, I'm going to stop. We didn't taste any chocolate this week. I hope you will still taste chocolate on your own. And I hope that was semi-interesting to learn about Valentine's Day and the history of chocolate and its connection to romantic love. Next week, I'll finish up and I'll talk about the chemicals and why people think that chocolate chemically affects how we feel, and that connection as an aphrodisiac. So if you like these videos and you want to learn more about chocolate in our world today, make sure you subscribe and like this video, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.